Hello and welcome to Conversations with Cheryl, a place where women can be seen, heard, and validated. Simulcast on YouTube, Instagram, and Anchor FM. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel or our podcast at anchor.fm. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conversations with Cheryl. I am your host, Cheryl Lacey Donovan, and I am so glad that you have decided to join us here today, especially for this particular topic. Today, we want to talk about it's okay not to be okay, what it looks like with depression. And I know that for a lot of us, particularly after the last couple of years, that is something that we may be very familiar with, whether we knew that we were or not. In our community, in particular, African American community, a lot of times that subject tends to be taboo. Anytime we talk about mental health or depression or anything like that, and it was kind of relevant when I went out to try to find some statistics. The statistics were all over the place. Some of them said we were higher, some of them said we were lower, some of them said that it was all over the place. And I think a lot of that is because we tend not to report it. We tend not to go and be seen by mental health professionals because we just don't want people to know what's going on with us. We're so used to what happens in this house stays in this house, and we've taken that on even now. So today I'm joined by Mario Brown, somebody that I love talking to. We've talked before about issues around mental health and this kind of thing in the past, and I know that he's going to be someone that can share some good insight with us. So Mario, thank you so much for joining us, and if you don't mind, just kind of introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. You are always such a radiant person and so vibrant and so life-giving, and I love your work. My name is Mario Brown, and I'm a pastor in Auburn, Alabama. I also am the CEO and founder of Life Matters with Mario Brown, which is a mindset transformation coaching service. And I work with people in this area. I mainly work with people who are making transition into entrepreneurship, that are trying to get their vision together but need a mindset change. I help people in relationship recovery. That's one of the main areas that we see a lot of depression in, people that are going through broken relationships, whether they be marriage, dating relationships, family broken relationships. And so I help them to change their mindset about how they're going to process that and to help them see a different perspective, and hopefully provide a platform for them to feel safe, number one, and then come up with some solutions by changing their mind. And so that's what I do. And I love it. I enjoy it so much because I see the need to provide a space, particularly for African Americans, because what I found is that if we don't create the safety, it won't happen.
Yes.
And it's up to us that are committed to this work to create that safe space for men and women, and even our young people, to create a safe space for them, non-judgmental, but even sharing our own stories, because we all have them, you know? So again, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So you said something that was very important, and I'm very glad to see that we're beginning to create those spaces now. I know before it was difficult to find people that looked like us, that were practicing mental health or that were willing to talk about their stories or give their journeys, if you will. And it's good to see that we are beginning to finally break through some of that and feel comfortable with talking about our issues and talking about our pain and the things that we're dealing with. And I know that you talked about the fact that we all have a story. So I was just wondering if there is a particular story that you might like to share with the listeners and viewers.
Absolutely. For many, many years, I've been preaching since I was 22 years old, and I'll be 57 in March. So I've been preaching a very long time. I travel the country preaching. I've done revivals. I'm pastoring churches and starting them. Over the last maybe 10 to 15 years, I have been unfulfilled in doing it. There was an emptiness. There was a void. It wasn't my not loving God. It wasn't my not liking church per se, but it no longer fulfilled me because I had been doing it for so long.
Right.
There were times that I was on the road preaching for 32 weeks out of a year. And you've seen it all, you've heard it all, you preach all the messages, you preach the revelation, you've done it all. We've just done it. And so coming to my church, I would do it because I didn't feel I had a choice, because I had started the work and I didn't even understand, where is this emptiness coming from? And I didn't have a lot of people I could talk to. Why? Because of the expectations that were on me. I pastored my mother. What do I say to my mother, who I taught God to? What do I say to her? That I'm tired? How do I say that to the people who are looking to me for leadership? So I did what I did on Sunday morning. I did it on Sunday night. I traveled, I preached, and I would go home and feel like an utter failure. You know what I mean? Like, how long can I do this? You know, somebody would call and say, well, hey, Mario, we want you to come and do this revival, do that revival. And literally I would be like,
not again.
okay, okay, all right, sure. So then I switch into that mode. And a lot of it is because I'm an introvert. I look and act extroverted, but when I promise you, Cheryl, I am a total introvert for real. So to go and preach, I was looking at the church and I become very frustrated with the church. Not necessarily the people, but what church was becoming. And it's not the church I recognize. And I don't really want to get into that, but that was a part of it. Preaching at 22, church was very different then. And I didn't find my place. I couldn't find where I fit in. I couldn't find my place. Preachers got on my nerves. I don't want to talk to y'all. You know what I mean? I don't want to go to dinner. I don't want to do any of that with y'all. You know what I mean? I just don't want to fool with y'all right now. And of course, the people that were in my inner circle, I still had problems talking to them about how I was feeling. And so I thought about it. I said to God, I said, I can't do this another 5 years like this. I can't do it. I get no joy out of doing this. I love preaching. So the events that happened, I would go to church and then would come home in the evenings and would be totally empty. We done shouted, fell out, spoke in tongues, ran around the church. Folks say they got healed, and I'm like, oh, praise God, praise God. And I'm driving home like, I'm done. I'm done. But I didn't feel an out and didn't have anybody that I could talk to that I trusted to understand it. Now, I wasn't clinically depressed, but I was situationally depressed. And I want to say that to you today. You may not be clinically depressed, but clinically depressed rather, but you are situationally depressed. There is an event going on that you feel absolutely isolated. You don't feel that there's an out. You don't feel that you can express yourself properly enough, because the people that expect something from you are going to give you religious answers. I didn't need a religious answer. I know the book from cover to cover. I know I have an encounter with God. Come on, I don't need you to give me no scriptures. Come on here. You know what I mean? Get out of here with that. I know how to pray. But even now, my prayer was for God to explain to me where I am. And Cheryl, I'm going to tell you something. On top of that, I started having problems with my back. I had a lipoma in my spinal cavity. Wow. And for 7 years, I had to basically sit and preach because nobody could find out what it was. That was even more depressing because now I feel totally inadequate. But again, the pressure on us, particularly as African-American men, is tough it out. Square your shoulders. Be an example of what it feels like and looks like to push. So I did it. But I would go home and again feel captive in my own thoughts, because I'm trying to figure out, what are you doing to me? Now, all this time, I'm still going to church. I'm still doing what I got to do. Still going, nobody knew that anything was wrong with me. Nobody knew. And then my mother had a diagnosis of lung cancer. At the same time. But the thing that lifted the depression out of it was because I concluded that I can do ministry a different way and that God would not have a problem with it. I was my own problem.
Wow.
My perspective and my commitment to my historical context and my historical content caused me to be my own jail keeper
Wow.
because I wasn't willing to challenge the traditional ways of doing church.
Wow.
It took the lipoma in my back to slow me down enough to get in God's mind and ask him, give me your perspective, because what I've been trying to do is to force my perspective onto you, which is why I couldn't get an answer, Cheryl, because he wasn't talking to me about that foolishness I was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
He wasn't going to talk. He addressed me according to his mind.
Yeah.
It took the death of my mother to lift the depression. How did that work? Because the person that I was most committed to left the earth. That was the most important thing for me. And once my mother left the earth, it was like there was this clarity in my mind that there is another way. And you know what he did? He sent the pandemic. He allowed the pandemic. Let me just say that, because some people say, God ain't sent that. I'm just going to say God allowed it. He permitted it to be because it was a game changer for many of us.
Yes.
It really was. And once I concluded that my perspective, and it was one scripture particularly, his ways are not yours. His thoughts are not your thoughts. His are higher than yours. And what I realize is that a lot of our depression is coming from an unwillingness to see it another way.
Yeah.
It's depressing to be married to an idea, to be married to a method. So the question was, what if God comes another way? Am I so married to my way or the way he came last year and the year before that, that I don't want an interruption or a disruption? So once I concluded that, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done, I submitted myself and the depression lifted.
Wow.
It lifted because I realized that I was the gate to the depression. My stoic unwillingness to see it another way, to even allow someone to present to me another perspective. Thus was birthed Life Matters. Because all this time, man, I have been helping people see things in different ways. That was what I did. I gave them prophetic insight. Have you considered? But yet I wasn't willing to consider anything other than the traditional way of doing things.
Yep.
And God is too vast to be stuck to one way.
Yeah.
And so what I think is, and I hope that my story can really help somebody, because many people right now that will watch this show will be in a position where pride won't allow them and cognitive dissonance won't allow them to say there's another way.
Yeah.
I closed my church during the pandemic in March, that year of the pandemic. And during that time, I knew I would never open it again. What happened was, and I'm not trying to talk, I'm not trying to overtalk you, I promise you that.
No. I will keep going. You're my brother from another mother. Keep going. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. See, the year before the pandemic, the Lord spoke to me and said, develop an infrastructure for a virtual church. Because you know Latanya Moore, attorney Latanya Moore.
Yes.
She kept telling me, she kept saying, you know, Mario, there's so many people that are listening to you on our show that are never going to go back to church, but they listen and they trust you. You need to set up this platform for them. I said, oh, okay, then, you know, again, that wasn't the usual way to have church for me. But I set it up anyway, not knowing that the pandemic was going to come. The pandemic was my out for my change. There was no resistance from my members. You know where the resistance came from? Other preachers.
Yes.
They were wearing me out. They were dogging me out. I'm talking about dragging me through the mud. Yeah. But you know what? I was so sure that this was it, that I was able to take it. And that lifted it off me. And I actually got my joy back. So my point is to say that I've reached more people being virtual than I would have been in Auburn, Alabama. I have people on the West Coast that are on my service 2 hours ahead of time, right? That are on my service, families that have come back to God. These high performing professionals that were done with church are locked in. You see what I'm saying? And it has given them life. And so now I understand that the purposes of God superseded my vision. So now I'm walking in the I haven't seen, ear haven't heard thing. Right? What does that really mean? That means that God blesses the thing that is hidden from the eye. That's what he blesses. It's everything that we're doing now, we couldn't see 5, 10 years ago, right? Because he was blessing the thing that was hidden from our eye. And so I was able to walk into that and get my life back. When I tell you I got new life, and that's the whole thing. So what would I say to someone? Perhaps the heaviness that you're feeling tonight is associated with your inability to allow another perspective to be seen. It's prolonging because you won't see it another way, right? There's always a workaround. There is always another perspective. And you have to be able to see the perspective without feeling that someone diminishes how you feel. It's acknowledging, true enough, this is how you feel. This is what happened to you. This is what has offended you. This is what have affected you. But let's process it another way. Let's look at this another way and see if there is something else, if there's another way to look at this. We can either say it's only 2 fish and 5 loaves, or we can say, but whose hands are the 2 fish and 5 loaves in? You see what I mean? It's a perspective change. Depression is real, but when it's not clinical, but situational, that's a perspective issue. And it can be remedied by just simply entertaining another way. There's another way to look at this, and it'll lift.
You know, I love the way that you put that the differences between it being a situational depression versus it being an actual clinical depression. Because I think that many of us suffer from the situational depression piece, which can be just as real and can be just as debilitating, but may not necessarily require like perhaps clinical intervention, so to speak.
Right.
And I think that if you know, I'm being transparent, a lot of the things that you said, I understand, because I'm like you know, I minister here and speak there, and you know, go to this conference and that conference, and you know, I'm trying to uplift everybody else and hold everybody else up, and never realizing, like you said, that at one point, when I get back, I'm empty. You know, there's nothing. Who do I go to and talk to that can handle what I have to say, and then not place judgment on the expectation that I should be okay, or that I'm supposed to know how to get out of this, or I'm the one with the answer, so I should practice what I preach, so to speak, you know? Right. And that it's like, you know, yeah, I get all of that, and I hear all of that, but then who helps the helper?
Absolutely.
You know, where does that come from? Who helps the helper? So I definitely understand exactly where you're coming from and what that feels like. And you know, when my youngest son started dealing with his issues and his addictions and things like that, you know, that was one thing. And like you said, I'm still pushing through, and I'm doing all the right things and praying and going all of that. And then last year, my stepfather passed away, and that just took all the wind that I had left. And I didn't even realize, probably until, because he passed away in November of 2021, I probably didn't even recognize it until maybe January or February. And I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know, you know, what to do with it. I just knew that it wasn't right. And it was a situational, and I'm glad you put it that way, a situational type of depression, because I didn't know what to do with that. Because it was unexpected, totally unexpected. And then my mom got sick, and then she's on dialysis 3 times a week. And you know, it's just like, what do I do with this, and how do I get out of it? And like you said, it was a situation where eventually I I began to recognize, okay, I need to get out of my own way. I need to get out of God's way. I need to get out of my head because if I don't, it could eventually become clinical.
Sure.
It could take me
That's
there.
right.
If I allow the enemy to continue to wrestle, cause me to wrestle with this,
Mhm.
I don't know what this is going to look like going forward. So, one of the things that we always hear people in the church community say is pray. What do you say to them?
Um, while I believe in prayer and I know that prayer works, the Bible says, come, let us reason together. Jesus is a wonderful counselor, which means we need a counselor. There are some things that cannot be prayed away. We can take them to prayer, but there are some, it's first natural, then spiritual. Mm-hmm. And I believe in prayer, but I also understand that prayer doesn't trump the natural process of having another human. That human, you know what? Job said this when he was going through his temptation. It's a real strange scripture. He was in his feelings at this particular point in time, and God began to ask him, where were you when I put the stars in the space? Where were you when I named the moon, the sun, the sun? Where were you, Job? You're acting kind of funny today. And Job said this. He said, how fair is that of you to ask me that when I don't have a daysman betwixt us? A daysman in the Hebrew means someone who is actually human enough to touch me, but holy enough to touch God. Mm-hmm. He said, I don't have a daysman. I can't answer you that. How dare you ask? How fair is that of you, right? We have to have a daysman betwixt us. We need somebody that can touch God while still laying hands on us. And many times I believe that while we pray, what we often need to pray is, send me someone in the human form that is your representative that can touch you while touching me. Then I can be okay. Because I need to know that there is somebody in this human form, because even right now, I'm too depressed to see you. So I need somebody that breathes like me, that talks like me, that has your mind, that has your assignment. And I am right in their path so they can now deal with me, right? So it's okay to pray, but then we have to be sure we understand how the answer to that prayer is coming. That prayer may be to find you a Cheryl, to find a Mario, to find a Mr. Lewis, to sit down and talk this thing out, right? That could be the answer to the prayer. So we have to ask ourselves, are we okay with the methodology of God? When he answers, do we recognize the answer? Because most times, this is true, most Christians are living theoretically. They're living in a theoretical sense of the reality of God. Because when trials come, this is where the rubber meets the road. Because now all of a sudden we just lose sight of everything we said about God while we were doing well. You see what I'm saying? See, you said this, that everybody was looking to you. You go, you speak, we preach, we encourage. Everybody's looking to you for the answer. Then all of a sudden your humanity shows up. Your son, your baby has this problem now. How does Cheryl, the one who we booked to speak here and come in, and she be telling us to hold on to God, son, change your hand, and then she over here letting go, right? That's a part of how you see yourself as well. How can I now not know what to do about this? When I be telling everybody else, listen, God gonna save your babies. God is going to come and rescue your daughters and your sons. And then now your son needs rescuing. Mm. So at this particular point in time, you're holding yourself hostage. You needed somebody because you had already stored up prayers. So prayer is not the thing that ain't stored up. The thing that needs to be handled now is the natural methodology of how God works with us. So this is why I'm saying, yeah, I want you to pray. But guess what I don't need? You to tell me I need to pray.
I'm well aware.
Absolutely. See, I'm praying for you. Yeah. So the last thing I need you to do is to tell me, oh, have you prayed? Absolutely, I have. You think? Yeah, absolutely, I prayed. However, The situation exists. It still exists. And a part of the reason is because of people that say to me, I can't believe you going through that. You the one that be normally praying for us. That's the last thing I need to hear, because now what you've done is now you've put me like an Elijah. I'm going to go in a cave and misbehave.
Yeah, 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 exactly. That's exactly what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. You know.
So listen, everybody, we're talking about it's okay not to be okay. A candid conversation about depression. Our next guest has joined us, Mr. Lewis. We're so glad to have you on tonight. And basically, what we're doing is just talking about our experiences, our journey. As we deal with depression, we have a few more minutes left to go. So I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to our listening audience, our viewing audience. Tell them a little bit about who you are, and also, if you would like, share with us a little bit about your journey if you dealt with depression.
All right. My name is Mr. Lewis. Um, I'm 35 years old. I'm from Flint, Michigan. I'm born and raised here. Um, well, my journey started with depression when my granny died in 2013. I was dealing with a lot of different things. My marriage wasn't going right. Uh, Most of my depression came from um, I was very disconnected from my granny's death, struggling with that. Didn't get no support from my family, nor I got support from my wife. Um, and just overall, growing up in a dysfunctional family lifestyle. So it was like, I didn't really know. Uh, I didn't. It was like I was drowning. Um, at work, at home. So anywhere I go, it was really no peace. And I was always smiling. I was always, I grew up in the church. My mother always took me and my brother to church. So I had that church background. I knew how to pray. I believe in prayer as well. But nothing was working. Um, So it was like my back was against the wall with everything. Like I said earlier, I was drowning on every level, at work, coming home, no peace. It was just chaos everywhere I went. And I remember one day I was living in Clio, Michigan. I was in my garage and I was crying for like 6 hours.
Mm.
Um, I was screaming out for God. I was praying. I was crying and crying and crying. And then I went in the house and my ex-wife, she's like, "What's wrong?" And my eyes was like bloodshot red. And I was like, "We need to talk." And I had a conversation with her, and we decided to separate. In this process that we separated, I began to get my prayer life back. I began to get my faith back, and I started dropping boulders off my shoulders.
Mm.
Um, and it's weird because when you're not equally yoked, um, things just don't go right. And my mother always told me that. She said, you have to find somebody that's equally yoked with you. Um, and we was not equally yoked, and I understood that as we progressed it on. Um, but when my depression came in, was I didn't even know I was depressed.
Mm.
I wasn't. I was working less. I was, believe it or not, I wasn't taking showers. I was just always in the bed. I wasn't playing with my son. Um, it was just really bad. Um, I never had any thoughts about suicide. But it was getting to that point, that it was getting to that level. And this is when I needed this change. And like I said, I was born and raised in Flint, Michigan. I was I was raised in the church. Church is all I knew. And it was like I really needed to make a stand to save my life so I could be here for my children. So I just got a divorce actually 2 years ago. And my life has got so much better. My prayer life has came back. I'm more happy. It was like depression was never really there. I was going into panic attacks. Like I'd be out in the store and it was like I couldn't breathe. My chest would get real heavy. I couldn't be around people. Like even people just being around certain people just threw me in a panic attack. I was going to the hospital a lot, thinking I was actually dying. And really, I was. I was dying mentally, even physically. It was like my body was just so heavy all the time. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't eat. So it was like once everything was over with, I never really got over my granny. I'm still dealing with that. Her birthday was actually yesterday. So it was like a sad little moment. And I was moping around the house. It's always a touchy situation. You know, depression is so big that you don't know who's really affected by it. You know, it's so many things that we are affected by depression that we can't look over. So it's just, you know, I just really thank God for giving me an opportunity to stand up. I thank God for him giving me a second chance just with my overall everyday life. And I thank him for reviving me overall, because everything I went through 2013 all the way up to 2020, it will make anybody lose faith. It will make anybody just do not want to live on this planet.
So did you find it difficult to find someone to talk to, or did you even want to talk to somebody because you are like Mario said earlier, you're a male, you're an African American male, and you're supposed to just square your shoulders and deal with it. Was that hard?
It was very hard. Like Mario said, you know, as a man in America, you have to be this tough guy all the time. You have to have this image that men don't cry, or you have to be strong at all times. And it was one particular person that I did go to that's been there every step of the way. And it's even hard with that because it's like you don't even want to. Everybody has issues and everybody has problems. So it's like I'm the type of person, I'm not selfish. So it's like I don't want to keep putting my problems off on somebody because they going through stuff just as well as me, you know? So I'm one of those type of people. I try to I'm very private. And I try to handle everything on my own, but a lot of times things are very unbearable and you need somebody to talk to. So
well, that's good. I'm so glad that you were able to find somebody to talk to, and it sounds like you're doing quite a bit better from where you were. I happen to know this young man personally, and from what I've known about him, he's a pretty good guy. So I'm just glad to see he's doing better. And Mario, I know that you have the things that you're doing. So tell us a little bit about what you may have going on in the near future and how people can contact you if they want to get in touch.
Yeah, and now, you know, I got to say something. You know, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Lewis, I appreciate your story, because you are the face of what we as African American men face on a daily basis. And you were in the clinical depression, believe it or not, that started off situational but led to the clinical. We talked about that before you came on. Unmanaged situational depression can easily lead to clinical. And when you lose somebody that was critical, it is very difficult. And a part of that depression sometimes is when you've seen people suffer that you love, you hate to see them leave. But the part of grief I think we do miss, and I don't call it grief because sometimes grief it involves guilt, but mourning is the real pure loss. The part of mourning that we don't talk about clinically is relief. The relief of seeing the suffering end. Because that sounds like you didn't love them. Now we get the judgment, self-judgment in other people. How could you be relieved that they're out of here? We'll say it, out of our mouth. Well, I'm just glad they ain't got to suffer no more. But we still don't really come into agreement with that. And because something about the relief feels like, well, could you have loved them to see them want to leave? Well, we all got an appointment with death that can't be canceled, right? But what I love about it, man, is that you did the work. You recognize that there were other components involved in your depression, being unequally yoked, not having a built-in support system, which now you can approach life differently because your next companion, you'll be able to say, all right, I know now from experience that things are going to happen and I need to see if a person is able to support me so that I don't have to feel like I'm a burden to them because I'm having a human moment. And what happens to us is, factually, because we feel like I don't want to be a burden to anybody, everybody else has their own stuff, we also see God the same way. Because we don't really go to God during those moments because we've agreed that I don't want to be a burden, I'll handle it myself. And so when we take it to him, we take it in a measured, weighted out way. And what happens to us is that we take it to him, but we're still trying to look strong. We don't want to be vulnerable because we are married to the idea that weakness is not acceptable to us as men. This is too weak. And I can't let my kids see me like this. My woman will never respect me if she, but again, that goes to having the ordained people, because some people are in your life that are transactional people. And some people are in your life for covenant. We've got to be able to determine, do I have covenant with this person? Because if I have covenant with them, I can be naked and unashamed with them. I can be just as weak as water in front of them, and they have a grace on their life to say something to me that will bridge me to my area of deliverance. So this is why, and I'm going to go ahead and finish, but this is why I do what I do. If you want to reach me, you can reach me at www.mariocbrown.org. And you can get on my calendar and make an appointment because I spend my whole days, it's my life, talking about situations like this and helping people to understand exactly what you're feeling. I work with military people, lawyers, doctors, high professionals, the teachers. I don't care who you are, because what I found is that it's the high performers, highest earners that are privately failing but are publicly successful. And because they have this expectation to be the healer. I have a client right now that's a doctor. He's an oncologist who's suffering with cancer. Now, what does the cancer doctor do when he's now the patient? And we're going through this whole mental assault on him because he knows what this looks like. He treats this on a daily basis. And yet his emotions are all over the place because now he is the patient, right? And so what we're talking about now is how to manage the emotions that come along with that. Because a lot of that is, I have healed what I have. Now, how do I heal what I have? Because I can't treat myself. And that's the way it is for us. And we have to be able to give each other the space and the grace to do that. So you can reach me at www.mariocbrown.org and get on my calendar and let's talk. You know what I mean? This is a safe space. It's virtual. You don't have to be in my city. And I want to present you an opportunity and create a space for you to grow out of and into the place you're supposed to be. So Absolutely. That's how you reach me, Cheryl.
All right. Well, listen, you guys, thank you so much. It has been real always with Mario Brown. And listen, brother, my brother from another mother, I'm telling you, that's who he is. And definitely he'll be back because I'm sure I'll have some more topics that he can come in and talk about with us. This is Conversations with Cheryl. I'm your host, Cheryl Lacey Donovan. And I'm glad that it ended up this way. At first, I was going to have males and females together, but I'm just going to make this part one where we talk to the brothers first about what it's like to be, to have depression and to say that it's okay not to be okay. A candid conversation with depression, part one with our brothers. How about that? We're going to do it that way. So then you can join us this week and we'll do part two with our sisters. You guys, thank you again for joining us. I love you all. Y'all stay on just a second before we get out of here. Just
Okay.
a second.
Love you
See you
too.
guys later. Bye-bye.